If you're a fan of the Souls-like genre and are looking for something with a much greater emphasis on in-your-face storytelling, Asterigos Curse of the Stars just might be the game for you. After all, you've probably just completed your 100th playthrough of Elden Ring and are finally looking to try something new, right? This genuinely impressive effort from indie developer Acme Gamestudio is something that feels like it could stand shoulder to shoulder with a lot of AAA titles in the genre, and it just might be your next favorite Souls-like game. My name's Johnny Bueno, and let's take a look at Asterigos Curse of the Stars. Asterigos Curse of the Stars casts you as Hilda, Disney princess lookalike and member of an elite band of warriors known as the Northwind Legion, who sets out in search of her fellow comrades, including her own father, in the very Greek-inspired and very cursed city of Aphis. Along the way, she'll find herself wrapped up in the Ephesians' affairs in a plot to lift the city from its curse for good. One of the first things I adored about Asterigos was its setting's inspiration from classic Greek culture. Acme Gamestudio does an incredible job using this as a basis while still creating something unique and interesting. While the very architecture of Aphis, the many citizens within it, and the names you'll hear might look and sound familiar from what you've seen in your favorite Greek history textbook, Asterigos takes its own twist on the source material, where magic plays an integral role in, well, pretty much everything. You'll see this as you traverse Aphis and its surrounding regions, all of which are incredibly colorful and well crafted, with each area offering a relatively unique experience and aesthetic from one another. I felt like Asterigos definitely sets itself apart from the average Souls-like in that its story is very much in your face at all times, and I mean this in two ways. First is that, comparatively to many other titles in the genre, you're not searching every nook, cranny, and item description in the world to get a little crumb of world-building information. It's very much in your face as it's presented to you through many cutscenes and non-cryptic NPCs scattered throughout the world. Of course, there are still random notes and journals to find and read because what Souls-like would be complete without them. The second thing that makes the story very much in your face is the dialogue. There is a lot of dialogue. You'll meet many NPCs in Asterigos, and I found that they really love to talk, sometimes a little too much. They usually make their point within the first handful of text boxes, but will then continue to talk with what feels like a lot of added fluff dialogue. Maybe I'm just an impatient gamer, but I did find myself skipping through a lot of unnecessary dialogue, especially toward the end of the game. Fortunately, the dialogue that is voice acted is done incredibly well.
I'm sorry. Oh no. Look what they've done to me.
Lady Marissa, don't worry. You'll be fine.
One final note regarding the story, which I honestly found very charming, was Hilda's journal. Main quest events and side quests are tracked via Hilda's crude sketches and descriptions detailed within it. Rather than a typical bulleted list of objectives you find in other games, Asterigos very much leans into the charm of its protagonist by giving you the journal that would very much be kept by a girl that's however old Hilda's supposed to be. Oh, and speaking of crude sketches of quest objectives, that includes the map as well. Yes, there is no actual map you can pull up at any time, aside from Hilda's sometimes poor attempt at cartography. There are no markers for quest objectives either. It's up to you to follow the journal and remember quest NPC locations. I could see this as both a good and bad thing. On one hand, it does give the player much more immersion into a very beautifully crafted world. On the other hand, it can lead to some frustration as Asterigos does have many confusing areas with multiple branching paths and dead ends, making getting lost an inevitability. In my experience, I did usually find some sort of treasure or lore document when I got lost, so it wasn't all that bad. But it definitely would have been helpful to know where important NPCs were, so I didn't run myself in circles trying to complete a side quest. The combat in Asterigos takes a somewhat simplified and more accessible approach in comparison to other titles in the genre. Hilda starts off the game with 6 weapons, and she'll keep those same 6 weapons throughout the entire game. It is nice that you get all of her available weapons right off the bat, as it gives you plenty of time to test out each one to find which weapons you're most comfortable with. But I'll admit I was somewhat disappointed by the lack of weapon variety. You'll have the choice of a sword and shield, a pair of daggers, a spear, a warhammer, a staff, and some magical bracelets. One thing I liked is that you can equip 2 weapons at a time, and you can quickly swap between each one in combat, as they both have a dedicated button on your controller. They even have unique attacks you can perform when swapping weapons mid-combo, allowing for some nice variety in how you can damage enemies. This is just a nice little added touch of complexity on what overall is a pretty standard combat system. I don't think anything in terms of combat wowed me, but it did overall feel very smooth and satisfying to use, as Hilda's attacks do have a great deal of weight to them. From an enemy standpoint, they have well-telegraphed attacks that any veteran Souls player should have no problem dodge rolling through. You also have the ability to parry attacks if you're using the spear, which felt easy to pull off with a very forgiving parry window. The spear's follow-up counterattack to a parry was also incredibly powerful, leading me to believe that this weapon in particular might be a little overpowered if you can utilize it to its full potential. I did actually find the variety of enemies in Asterigos to be pretty impressive. Every area you visit will have a few rehashed enemies here and there, but for the most part contain unique monsters you won't encounter in other areas. Some are a little frustrating to deal with, like these little purple buzzsaw dudes which killed me more times than I'd like to admit, while others, like the Minotaurs, can be fun to fight as you dance around their attacks and exploit their openings. I'm a little torn on the bosses though. There are several that offer tons of spectacle, like the giant harpy Eulalia, as well as some fast-paced action like the fight with Garrison, but overall none of them were particularly difficult to defeat. It didn't seem like most of the bosses were very aggressive, and I found that it was far too easy to dodge their attacks simply by moving to the side. Also, maybe I wasn't upgrading my weapons enough, but some of them just felt like damage sponges, particularly the fight with the twin colossi. The fight kind of made me feel like a small dog, incessantly nipping at their ankles until they eventually toppled over and were defeated. There is one mid-game boss that takes the cake for both difficulty and spectacle, but I won't discuss it here for spoiler purposes. All I can say is that it's very much a balanced one-on-one duel-style fight that is easily the best boss fight in the entire game. As you progress through the world of Aphis and level up through defeating enemies, you'll obtain points to upgrade Hilda's stats as well as unlock nodes in a hefty talent tree, with each of Hilda's 6 weapons getting its own branch. Something that I believe Asterigos does well in this regard is that the nodes you unlock actually feel impactful. Sometimes games give you very minuscule talents like a small increase to your damage or damage reduction that barely feels rewarding when you unlock it. Many of the talents in Asterigos will alter the way your attacks work in some way, like allowing you to move while blocking with the sword and shield or adding a follow-up attack to your dagger combos. There are also other talents which will significantly change how some attacks work, like one that changes the spear's parry counterattack to a sweeping strike, allowing you to hit multiple enemies at once in an area in front of you, but the trade-off is that you deal less damage. I did like this a lot, as talents like these can cater to many different playstyles despite the limited options for actual weapons you can acquire in the game. There are options to go all out in damage, while others offer more utility, and it's completely up to the player to make the build that works the best for them. The talent tree also hosts several unlockable skills for each weapon, which you can add to your skill bar with a limit of 4 total skills. I found these to actually be incredibly useful, and you can mix and match them as you see fit. While I almost entirely focused on spear-related skills, I was also able to add a skill that created a damage buff zone on the ground. This all seems like pretty basic stuff for a Souls-like, but I think Asterigos does execute these basics pretty well. Beyond the talent tree, there's the standard process of upgrading weapons from +1 to +2, and so on, at the cost of materials found throughout the world. Materials collected can also be used to craft trinkets, which you can equip to Hilda to improve her resistance to various damage types, and offer unique effects like increased experience gain. I felt like the trinkets didn't really make much of a difference during my playthrough, and you could honestly beat the game without equipping a single one, though they're likely far more useful when playing on hard mode, where you'll be taking more damage from attacks. Now that we've covered the story, gameplay, and progression of Asterigos' Curse of the Stars, let's summarize what it did well and what wasn't so great. For the positives, Asterigos does an amazing job utilizing its Greek inspiration to craft a world that still feels completely unique and interesting. Aphis is an incredibly colorful and unforgettable place, offering several zones that feel very unique from one another. Hilda as a protagonist is very likable, with her charming personality even oozing into the game's journal with her various sketches. Combat in Asterigos does feel very weighty and satisfying. The game has decent enemy variety, with each zone featuring a number of unique enemies you won't encounter elsewhere. And the talent tree offers impactful choices, including talents that alter how you attack, allowing for a variety of ways to approach combat. For the negatives, dialogue sometimes feels somewhat bloated, with NPCs droning on and on for a little too long. The absence of a consistent map and trackable quest objectives may be a pain point if you're not a fan of being lost for long periods of time. The overall gameplay doesn't have a great deal of depth due to the basic combat and lack of weapon variety. And the majority of bosses offered little challenge due to their slow, easy-to-dodge attacks. Asterigos' Curse of the Stars is a very strong effort for an indie developer's debut game. There's clearly a passion for world and lore building that was poured into this game, and I sincerely hope we get to see more of it in the future. With some added depth to the combat, more concise dialogue, and some easier objective tracking, I could see future titles in the series being able to stand up to the genre's greatest. Either way, it certainly got me excited for what Acme Gamestudio has in store for us next. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and please let me know what you think in the comments below. Every little bit of interaction helps and is greatly appreciated, as I love making videos like this. So subscribe if you want to see more, and thank you for watching.